So, are you still with me? Okay, so now we've come to the third sociological theoretical perspective. And I like this one very much. It's on a micro level and it's called symbolic interactionism. And as a way for you to remember it, the other ones you could remember by the name, is if you see the picture I'm using as a background, I'm using the kaleidoscope as my metaphor. Have you ever seen a kaleidoscope? I have one here. Depending on where you stand and how the light falls, you will see something. And no individual will see it the same. So it has to do a lot with experience. My personal experience, my lived experience, my experience of the things I give meaning to. And as you will see, the micro level focuses on the interaction between individuals where we come to agree upon meaning. Okay, so how do we construct meaning? What is experience? How do I become who I am? Or how does my group become my group? Okay, so let's dig in. So to summarize the most important things of symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionism sees society as the product of everyday interactions. Micro, again, micro lens of sociology, okay? And it really examines how one person develops itself and gets its place in society. So symbolic interactionism studies how meaning comes to be constructed. Okay, as I'm saying, constructed, that word will come again, as you will see, that society constructs things for us. Okay, so we see how meaning comes to be constructed and shared by a group. Think of something like culture. What is a culture and how does a culture become shared, become something shared in a group? So symbolic interactionism views society as a social construction that is constantly constructed and reconstructed. We negotiate this construction as individuals through our use of symbols, language, and representation. Okay, so human beings, okay, shape society by interacting and the actions they take. Interaction is an action, okay? Meaning is something that we negotiate. We are constantly making sense of our experience, making sense of who we are, making sense of the world around us by negotiating our meanings, okay? And meanings change. What it means to be me when I was 12 years old is, of course, not the same what it means to be me now at the age I am. So it's an ongoing process, okay? Meanings can change and be modified. Symbolic interactionism has been influenced by Max Weber's theory of social action, which emphasized that we need to understand the setting from the point of view of the individuals. A very important footnote here is that symbolic interactionism is the most influential sociological perspective until now. Each one I mentioned until now is important on itself. It brought something for our theoretical toolbox of how we analyze and make sense of social patterns in society. But symbolic interactionism has a special place, being a macro theory. Okay, so I already said Max Weber is a founding father of symbolic interactionism. Also is George Mead. And here we get the comic figures I make for them for you to just remember one important thing they said. And Weber says, meanings and actions shape society. Modern society is the product of a new way of thinking, not just of new technology and capitalism. And it's interesting to put Max Weber in relation to Emil Durkheim and Karl Marx. They were approximately at the same time studying the changes that came into being because the Industrial Revolution. And Marx focused on capitalist society, how that changed society. So social change was interpreted through Karl Marx, through capitalist society. Emil Durkheim studied society by seeing how integration, remember, and solidarity, how that changed during Industrial Revolution. And Max Weber looked at ideas, how ideas also influence how society changes. And another founding father of symbolic interactionism is George Mead. And George Mead, we will get more of George Mead in Unit 6, where we'll be talking about socialization and theories of the self and interaction. But for now, we have to know something like a blurb he said, I look at how we assemble our sense of self over time based on social experience. You see, time, temporality, who we are, who we think we are, is a construction. And it is something that is ongoing. You go into the world and you learn. And learning is very important for symbolic interactionism theories. And we will talk about that more in depth, the role of learning, learning how to be yourself, learning how to be a part of a society in Unit 5. So just to recap, symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionism is meaning is important through the human process of finding meaning in our world and our surroundings. We define who we are and we start defining who others are. Having a sense of who you are also, in a way, counterpositions you to other ones. Who do you feel that you are part of and who do you don't feel you're not part of? So to which social groups do we belong? And it is a broad scope it gives a broad scope to the language of meaning. Who I am, my identity, the social group I'm part of, etc., is something that is socially constructed, not only through the ideas. I get to learn the ideas I produce, the ideas that I feel connected to or not connected to, but also bodies, emotions. Okay, so I bring my whole lived experience, who I am, to the table. And it really focused on things like concepts that are more abstract, like what is culture. That will be we will talk about that in Unit 5. But how is culture constructed, and how does something like culture becomes part of something, a group who share the same culture? How do they learn culture? Okay, so symbolic interactionism sees society as an assemblage, okay, a constellation of subjective meanings and different responses. Okay, I want to give you an example of how a micro perspective here, symbolic interactionism, differs from, for instance, a macro perspective. Say you want to study gangs, the phenomena of gangs. And a macro perspective would look at how gangs, why we have gangs. You would look at maybe things like exclusion from society, social institutions and resources, maybe the failing at the education system, maybe crime is something reproduced, maybe poverty. All these big social institutions and social structures would be how a macro perspective would look at the phenomena of gangs. Symbolic interactionism, a micro perspective, would look at what does it mean to be a gang member? What does it mean to my identity? It means, for instance, I'm being seen as deviant. We will talk about deviancy in Unit 7. But for now, let's focus on what it means to be a gang member in my example. Maybe I'm excluded from other resources in society, and in my gang I have a sense of security. I have a sense of brotherhood or sisterhood. So, you know, it seems we see gangs as something that becomes constructed as an identity, the lived experience of being a gang member. Ooh. Core questions that symbolic interactionisms ask are how is society experienced? How do individuals attempt to shape the reality perceived by others, by themselves? How does individual behavior change from one situation to another? How do human beings interact to create, sustain, and change social patterns? Other type of questions would be, what role do language and symbols play? How does interaction shape individual behavior? How does the individual give meaning to fill in the blanks? What does it mean to be a woman, a boy, a girl, an Aruban, a Venezuelan immigrant, to be in love, to be depressed? What does it mean to live now during a COVID pandemic? All of us would have maybe similar experiences, but all of us have unique experiences. So we look at the level of interactions and the individual, how we come to construct meaning, which is a process that is ongoing. So in Unit 6, I already mentioned, we will be talking about how do we get socialized. And symbolic interactionism will be our foundation in understanding socialization. Although we experience socialization throughout our lives, the most intense and core time of socialization is in our childhood. So we will look at, in Unit 6, theories that can explain primary socialization. Okay, I will talk about George Mead, Charles Cooley, the author. I didn't mention Charles Cooley yet. He came with the theory of looking glass. You will get that in Unit 6. And he also was a founder of symbolic interactionism, and he was a student of George Mead. Okay, so we will learn more about that. I will also introduce other theorists such as Irving Goffman and Freud, Sigmund Freud. So the social construction of everyday life. This is one of sociology's most loved concepts, loved theories, that our experience is being constructed. What does it mean to be, I already asked, what does it mean to be a woman living in 2020? What does it mean to be bisexual? What does it mean to be transgender? What does it mean to be an immigrant? But also other things we get socialized into, like beauty. What is beauty? Society tells me what beauty is. So again, yourself, who you are, gets into this conversation with your world. And representation is very important. What how is beauty being represented in society? Um, Look at here at these 17 magazine cover, and you see, for instance, a cover from 1975 versus one of 2010, and you see there's a different way of how 17 magazine, a mainstream celebrity magazine, is telling me what is supposed to be beautiful. Okay, and I can imagine you all have a sociological imagination in you already, that some red flags come up. Eh? Who is being represented here? Who is the one who has the privilege? Who has the one who has the privilege, the authority to tell me what is beautiful? What is being represented here? You know, um, where is um, where is a more diversity look at beautiful, at what is beautiful? So you see, this is where we're going. So meaning making, social construction, but also the ability where our sociological imagination teaches us to critique representations of the social. So I'm critiquing here um, what beauty means. Beauty doesn't mean you have to be thin, you have to be white, you have to have blonde hair. Beauty, we decide what beauty is. Okay, feminist theories, critical media scholars all talk about representation of beauty and they critique it. Okay, so society fabricates the idea of what beauty is, but think again, because reflections in the mirror may be distorted by a socially constructed idea of what beauty is. So ask yourself, how do you see yourself as beautiful? You are beautiful. Tell me, what is beautiful in your experience? And I already mentioned, and an interesting thing in an important core to symbolic interactionism is what stories get told. Who tells your story, your lived experience? And this goes in hand with representations of social group, of a diversity. And um, now, because we are more aware, and here conflict theorists have helped us, modern conflict theorists, we see more diversity in the presentation. Think about, for instance, in the media, in movies and books you read, that how LGBTQ communities are represented. Think about the beautiful show Queer Eye, or think about how we're not only seeing abled bodies on the screen, but more disability. We are normalizing that, you know, and race and ethnicity and all these, when they go together, which is intersectionality, a concept we will learn more about in depth. So social construction of everyday life and of our experience and of our reality. Okay, symbolic interactionism offers us a lens through which we can actually deconstruct, okay, how we become who we are, and we question meaning making. We start being aware of what it means to be part of a culture, what it means to make something part of your identity. A lot of identity issues um, are studied through a lens of symbolic interactionism, branching out in other more specific theories. Okay, we focus on symbols, again, language, gesture, objects, artifacts that people use to interact. And we are interested in how people interpret these symbols, these objects, these daily interactions, these representations. Um, I want to bring another couple of sociologists to the picture. They're not mentioned in your book, but I think it's important that you know. Social construction happens to repeatedly doing the same thing, okay? And Peter Berger and Thomas Lucan, sociologists in 1966, that came with classic work in sociology, which is called The Social Construction of Reality. It was a book written for us to question how science can be biased and how that science in on itself can be just a social reality, can be a social construction. And they introduced a term, and that's the term I want you to remember. You don't have to remember a lot about Peter Berger and Thomas Lucan, but you have to remember the concept of habitualization, habitualization, okay? So I'm gonna quote them from their book, The Social Construction of Social Construction of Reality. Okay, habitualization describes how any action that is repeated frequently becomes cast into a pattern. Again, we're talking about social patterns, which can then be performed again in the future in the same manner with the same economical effort. This is how social construction gets into the place. If you think that what is beautiful is because what you only see in magazines and on the screen, this is a pattern, okay? So beauty gets recast, repeated, and then we kind of start thinking that that is what beautiful is. That's why you have a sociological imagination, and you can, with your sociological eye, you can dissect patterns. You can recognize patterns. Hey, this is not the main way of what beautiful means. Beautiful is more. Beautiful is diversity. So there are more representations of what beautiful is. So not only do we construct our own society according to them, but we accept it as it is because others have created before us. Society according to them is habits. And that's where you are wiser than just walking like a zombie during life and not being aware of your power, your beauty, your voice, okay? And that's what sociology wants to do. Sociology wants to empower you, okay? That you see you can construct the life, the beautiful life of dignity where you belong, okay? So, critique, of course, just as we critique all others, okay, we're gonna critique symbolic interactionism too, okay? So recall that I introduced two other macro theoretical perspectives, and these allow us to analyze the causes of social problems caused by social structures, social institutions, and helped us, not all of them, but helped us, conflict theory, to realize how we can bring about social change. Okay, so social problems and social change are macro-sociological concepts. And symbolic interactionism is focused on the micro level. It's a micro level theory. So by focusing on the day-to-day experience interaction, we might overlook the workings of these larger structures. I already said social problems and social change are macro-sociological concepts, and only looking through the glasses of a symbolic interactionism, which is a micro-theory, will obstruct big structures, okay? So the most beautiful thing would be to combine them. I think an example, let me give you an example of what could be how to combine them and how one obstructs the other. If you only study, for instance, the lived experience of what it means to be a female soldier in a predominantly male military system, you would, of course, bring such rich data of lived experience, you know, maybe discrimination, maybe bullying, maybe a sort of superpower resilience that you have to not just to do your soldier job that on itself is very traumatic and a hard job, but also what it means to be part of only a male soldiers. But if you only focus on the lived experience through micro lens, you would not focus on institutional issues like how gender inequality is something reproduced in the government, in the economy, and the military. And this has led to such a soldier school to be predominantly male. So by focusing on on how any individual becomes socialized into the norms and values of his or her social group and thereby shapes a sense of self, symbolic interactionism focuses on different questions than the two other perspectives. The most beautiful thing is to combine them, okay? So there's a beautiful combination that exists between conflict theory and symbolic interactionism. Okay, and of course, sociologists a bit frustrated with symbolic symbolic interactionism's inability to study social problems, as I mentioned before, have combined it with conflict theory. And this theory, what we call social constructionism, okay, begins with what symbolic interactionism teaches us, that reality is constructed. Just okay, every society creates norms, values, objects, symbols, judgments, okay, and it finds so therefore we use symbolic interactionism. But along the way, though, different categories of groups of people in the society get different rewards than other. Think about how, for instance, what it means to have a disability, and how a group with a disability doesn't get access to society as people who are able bodies. Okay, and by combining these two, by shedding light on the meaning making of what it means, the lived experience of what it means to have a disability with conflict theory, where we're saying that power and resources are not distributed in an equal way, we can actually try to come with social interactions that can cause change. Okay, so we can change the system. So combining these two. My friend was in Berlin, and she knows I love Alice in Wonderland, and she made a photograph of this door she came across in Berlin. And I think this was very fitting for social constructionism. The opening goes on shrinking and in my face. Sorry, the opening goes on shrinking and in my face, doors are shut. My name is not Alice, and this is not Wonderland. So you see, the lived experience is for each individual and for social groups, others. So we've come to the full theoretical circle of this journey, the sociological journey that took us in time to see how these theories that are still the foundations of sociology, how they have come to be, to understand. And now the question is, how do structural functionalism, conflict perspectives, and symbolic interactionism work together to help us get a more complete view of reality? I already mentioned, for instance, the beautiful combination between symbolic interactionism and conflict theory and social constructionism. But I mean, if we boil it down to what we've learned, it becomes clear that um, we have now kind of a full circle. Let me do kind of, because the circle is not full. Okay, there's a lot of critique on all these theories. I will end with that in a minute. But what have you learned until now? So small groups create norms. Symbolic interactionism teaches us that. Social institutions are created out of interaction. Okay, so we come to, we're jumping from the micro to the macro. Institutions shape society. There, we've landed in the macro, and power differences are ultimately created. So we see structural functionalism, okay, who says institutions shape society and power differences are made visible in conflict theory. So the combination of each theoretical lens brings more richness to the understanding of society and social problems. We need to combine them to have a more rich, a more up-to-date, a more sensitive sociological imagination that is attuned to the complexities of society. Remember, I started in Unit 1 telling you that society is so complex, and one thing that sociology teaches us is to embrace this complexity, and it gives us tools in terms of theories. And in the next lecture, I'll be talking about research methodology, so we can have a toolbox to deal with complexity. Okay, but no single perspective on itself cover its totality, so it's bringing them together. Okay, structural functionalists focus on social order and institutions and agreement on basic values that create and sustain social order, but tend to overlook conflict and inequality. Inequalities is the baby of sociology. Sociology is there to shed light on inequality, and conflict theories, conflict theory help us to do that. Okay, they do the opposite as structural functionalism. They see social problems caused by oppression and injustices. But what they do, they overlook moments of order or social harmony that we can learn from structural functionalism. So neither one of these two macro theories deal with the behavior of the individual in small groups and interaction. Okay, so that leaves the symbolic interactionist with a major task to examine how groups create culture and pass it on to the next generation. But symbolic interactionism, as we've learned, ignore macro issues of power and control, social harmony and balance. So it is the combination of these perspectives that will give you a much rich and more finer picture. Okay, practice using all three of them. When you see society, try to think, oh, okay, how would symbolic interactionism look at this? How would conflict theory look at this? How would structural functionalism look at this specific phenomenon? And you will see that each one gives you a different angle. And having more angle broadens your sociological imagination. These three theories are very important, and they will come back in our other units because they are the foundation from which sociology operates. Okay, and I want to end with a critical note that we've seen until now the history of sociology, and sociology is very, very aware of its own history. And because your time where you're in is what influences the theories you have. And we, of course, have adopted theories through time. And Sociology has mainly been by men for men, about men, white heterosexual men. As such, the discipline has been limited and biased. We will learn more about that. And other groups and areas of significance have been overlooked. Think of racism, I already mentioned, and diversity, racism and xenophobia, patriarchy, okay, for women, smash patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia for LGBT communities, colonization for non-Western and indigenous groups, um, hegemony, the glorification of mainstream ideas that get glorified above other alternative ideas. And I want you to be critical, a critical student, a critical thinker, and a critical practitioner of sociology or any social science discipline. So you have to be aware of time and history, okay? And thank you for your time.